Salute Discipoli. Today we're going to review Latin nomina or Latin nouns, and specifically we're going to review how to decline Latin nouns and also what the cases of Latin nouns are used for. And before we begin, we do have some necessary vocabulary. First of all, nouns have declensions. They belong to a specific group based on the spelling patterns or the endings that they have. Nouns also have gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter. Nouns have number, singular or plural, and nouns also have case, and that is how that noun is being used in a particular sentence. Before we begin with what our declension endings are and how to decline our nouns, we do need to go over how we first tell what declension a noun belongs to. So we have our dictionary entry for puella, puellae, and of course all dictionary entries are nominative singular, genitive singular, followed by the gender. In order to tell what declension a noun belongs to, we want to look at this genitive singular ending. This word, puella, belongs to first declension because of the ending on the genitive singular, the AE. All words that end in AE in that genitive singular will belong to first declension. And then, of course, because it ends in an A in the nominative, it's likely to be a feminine word. For second declension nouns, we're again looking at this genitive singular ending, and all second declension words will end with an I in the genitive singular. Then after that, we can look at that nominative to get a look at what the gender is likely to be. If the nominative ends in a US, it's likely to be masculine, but if it ends in a UM, it's likely to be neuter. Finally, for third declension, all third declension words will end in an IS in the genitive singular, and then we can go back through to look at the nominative singular for our genders. Words that end in X are likely to be feminine. Words that end in OR are likely to be masculine. And then, of course, we've got our neuters, and that's US, MEN, TER, and similar sorts of endings. As we go through for declining words, let's start with the prima declinatio, the first declension, and you'll remember that we have some steps to follow to make sure that we get all of our spelling changes done correctly. So first of all, we're going to be looking at the word puella, puellae, girl, and our first step is to drop down the nominative singular and the genitive singular. We're then going to find the base, and we do that by crossing out that genitive singular ending, and we're left with puel, and we're going to add that everywhere else. And then finally, we're going to go through and add the rest of our endings using our first declension song. I, room, is, as, is. That's the first declension. Easy as you please, ha, ha, ha. For secunda declinatio, we're going to be using our word servus, servi, slave, and once again, we're going to drop down the nominative singular and the genitive singular. We're going to find that base by crossing out the I in the genitive singular, and we're left with serv. To that, we're going to add the rest of our endings using our second declension song. Declining we will go with usi o o a e o rumi so sis. It's second declension yo. Now when we have neuter nouns in second declension or even in third declension later on, we have half steps that we need to complete in addition to our normal 3 steps. So let's go through a neuter noun in second declension, baculum, baculi, stick. Once again, we're going to start by dropping down the nominative and the genitive singular. And then we have a half step. We want to make sure to copy this nominative word into the accusative and the vocative singular, because for all neuter nouns, the nominative, accusative, and vocative will always be the same. After we copy those down, we can go on to step 2 and find our base by crossing out that genitive singular ending, and we're left with bacul as our base for everywhere else that we haven't filled in yet. Once again, we have a half step for neuter nouns, and that is to make sure to fill in those neuter plural A's in the nominative, accusative, and vocative. Then we can move on to step number 3 and fill in the rest of our endings that we haven't done yet using our second declension song. Remember to only fill in the ones that have the base unfilled yet. When we're doing tertia declinatio, or third declension, we're going to use bos bois, cow, and we're going to follow the normal 3 steps because bos bois is a masculine word. We don't have to worry about the neuter half steps. We're going to drop down the nominative and genitive singular. We're going to find our base by crossing out that is genitive singular ending, and we're left with bov for the rest of our forms. And then we're going to add the rest of our endings to that, using our third declension song. Blank is ema, wonder if you've heard. Asum ibus, ace and ibus, this declension's third. Now a quick reminder for third declension, because the nominative is almost always copied into the vocative, notice that we didn't use the bov base for the vocative. We want to copy that word directly from the nominative. For our neuters, again, we're going to have those half steps. So for third declension with tempus temporis, we're going to drop down the nominative singular and the genitive singular. And then we're going to have that half step of copying that nominative into the accusative and into the vocative. Then we can find our base by crossing off that is. And remember to fill in your nominative, accusative, and vocative plural endings for our neuters right away. That's that A. Then you can use the third declension song to fill in any forms that you haven't filled in an ending for. Now that we've reviewed how to decline all of our different nouns in first, second, and third, both the masculine, feminine, and the neuter forms, let's take a moment to review what our cases are used for as we're reading and as we're writing Latin. And we have 6 cases in Latin: the nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative, and vocative. And of course we want to remember these in orders, so please use that mnemonic: never give dogs any abuse Vinny, to remember the order of your cases. So let's talk about what these are used for. First, the nominative is primarily used as the subject of a sentence. We're going to ask who or what is doing the action of our sentence. So in a sentence like Puella sub arbore sedet, we ask who is sitting under the tree, and our answer is the girl, and she is in the nominative case. The nominative is also used as a complement with linking verbs, and our primary linking verb in Latin is any form of sum esse. And anytime you see this word, you should be focusing only on using the nominative when you're writing. So we have a sentence like Puella est Romana, and here Puella is our subject of the sentence. She is the one who is. And then Romana here is our adjectival complement. Notice how it is also in the nominative case. And that's because with a linking verbs are giant equal signs. So the subject, which is nominative, needs to be equal to that complement. We need to do that by both being in the nominative case. The genitive case is used primarily for possession, and in English we're going to use the translation of the word of with this. We're going to ask whose noun it is. Who does this object belong to? So in our sentence, servi domini in agris laborant, here we have the slaves of the master. Domini is in the genitive case, so we're going to use of. The slaves belong to the master possesses these slaves. And of course, we do also have other means of translating this in English using your apostrophe S forms. So instead of always using of, we can also use that apostrophe S and say the master's slaves instead of the slaves of the master. The genitive case is also used to talk about the part of a whole, and here we have a couple of different examples. We can translate this as of, but frequently in English this sounds very formal and stilted. So we have pars cubiculi, part of the bedroom. Now what we have is the word in the genitive is the thing that can be split up into smaller parts, and then the word that comes before it is the specific thing that we're going to be talking about. So a part of the bedroom. We also have phrases like nihil clamorus, and this one's a little bit stranger in English because we're not used to dividing up shouting as having parts. But here we can translate it as nothing of the shouting, and here is where we don't want to use that of translation because it sounds very formal in English, and we want to instead say no shouts. The dative case is something that we're going to be focusing a lot on in Latin too, and it's used for indirect objects. And an indirect object is that person or thing to or for whom something is said, given, or done. And so we're going to ask to or for whom is something said, given, or done. We have puer librum sero dat, and here we have the boy, who is our subject, doing the action of our verb, and it's affecting the book, our direct object. And then finally we have this word servo, which is in our dative case as our indirect object. The boy is giving a book to whom? To the slave. The accusative case is used for those direct objects. We want to ask whom or what is the subject verbing. They're going to directly receive the action of the verb. So puella arborem ascendit. Here, the puella, nominative subject, is doing the action of the verb climbing, and the thing that she is climbing is the tree. So the tree is receiving the girl climbing, and it's receiving the action of being climbed. So it's going to be our direct object in the accusative case. The accusative case is also used as the object of some prepositions. Any preposition that doesn't take the ablative is going to take the accusative instead. So when you see prepositions like ad or prope, per, or in, we want to make sure to change the noun that comes behind it so that it's in the accusative case. Those ablative prepositions, however, are any of those uses of sid space. He is our ablative astronaut, used to make sure that we remember which prepositions take the ablative. We have sub, in, de, sine, pro, a or ob, cum, a or x. And so any of the words that are in sid space, these words, we want to make sure to change the word that comes after it so that it's in that ablative case. Sometimes we also have uses of the ablative that don't have a preposition in the Latin, but we want to make sure to translate those with prepositions in the English. So for example, illa nocte Daus getam baculo verberat. That night, Daus beats Geta with a stick. We don't actually have a word for with in the Latin. It's just the ablative noun baculo. But in English, we need to make sure to translate that with a preposition. We're going to have a video later on to review our uses of the ablative when they don't have a preposition, so stay tuned for that. And finally, our last use of our cases is the vocative, and this is used when you are directly talking to somebody. You want to be on the lookout in your readings for quotation marks to indicate direct speech, using second person verbs, so when you have a verb that means you or you all, and then of course also our imperative commands when you're commanding somebody and directly commanding them in that way. You're going to look for words that are in the vocative. So our example, sexte, tuas puer molestus, noli vexare me. Here we are directly talking to Sextus, and we need to make sure that we have that vocative ending on his name instead of our normal nominative. Take a moment and just write down all of these uses of our cases in Latin, and stay tuned for the next video. Valete discipuli.